Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 12:27 p.m. on Tuesday, 20th of January 2026. And it's a bit of a windy day again, but the sun's shining even though there's quite a bit of cloud cover. So I thought the birdie boys and I might sit outside and they get to enjoy the garden and you get to enjoy, if you enjoy it at all. Not self-pitying here, just being a bit ironic, I think. You get to rather enjoy my reading to you of Boadicea by Amanda Scott. And we're up to chapter 44. Right, let us begin. The trumpets rang frantically, tuneful as birdsong. 3 notes ripped and ripped again. Before they could sound for the 3rd time, Valerius spun the crow horse on its hocks. Longinus was with him. He had drilled as often, as hard and as long. The trumpets sang to his heart's blood. Sigfar was slower. "Come on!" Valerius screamed it over the crush and pulp, and then quieter when she was close enough. "It's Corvus." It was Corvus, stationed out of sight on the right, who had waited until they had committed to the field and then come at their backs, because it was what Valerius would have done. He was ready for it. His honour guard followed him as fast as they might. He had less than 200 now against a full cavalry wing of 500. I'm just amused because little Bo's jumped on that big swing and he seems to feel quite secure and safe in that. I must consider buying another one for his inside cage since he likes it now. Doesn't use the other swings, which is weird, maybe because they're just a single piece of branch. He doesn't feel safe enough, or I don't know what that's even about. But it's good that he likes it now. So, right, here we go, people of Earth. Led by Hugh, who used his sling with startling efficiency, Valerius's horse warriors broadened out in a line as they fought their way free of the melee. It took longer than it should have done. The footing was cluttered with the pulp of dead men, and no room to fight easily free from them. "Come on!" A line of cavalry came at a gallop, curving back in a bow's arc that let the front ranks meet first and the rest hold back to circle the outskirts if needed. The cavalry manuals offered 2 standard rye posts to that, and Valerius had neither the time nor the trained men for either, only warriors who would give him their hearts and horses that he believed that he had to believe, were faster, and stronger, and had far greater stamina than the enemy. Left, he swung his own blade and his own horse, and they followed, as geese follow the lead bird, as fish the eye of the shoal, only slower, because some were still fighting. He led them over the ridge and back down, and the slope gave them speed and momentum, as it had done to the legionaries. He did not run headlong into a waiting horde, but turned hard at the bottom, so that all who followed him swung out wide and back in again, and came in at the right-hand side of Corvus's arched bow of riders, the sword side, where the shields were no use against men whose focus had been in front and whose vision had been blocked by the ridge. The clash was short and sharp and light, and only 6 of the enemy died. Valerius pulled the crow horse far out to the side and back in again, stinging now at the rear of Corvus's men as a hornet stings a horse. A great big butterfly just flew by, I got distracted. To live, the cavalry had to turn and fight, leaving Brayaca and the central mass behind them. Right, that was unfortunate, wasn't it? Dribbled a bit. Dear Goddess, I hope I don't get Alzheimer's like my mother. That was kind of the first sign. She just kept constantly spilling food and drink down her front. Poor thing. It was awful. It really was awful. Anyway, every time something like that happens to me, I fucking freak out. People are there. How's your mental health, little Bo? He says, I'm a happy bird now, Mama T. I've got a big cage and I've got companionship with Kermie, even though he annoys me sometimes. And I've got good food and I've got you. What more can a little man birdie want? Right. He's right, you know, though. They do have a nice life now. Took them months to adapt to having a new owner and new cages and all the changes, but they're quite contented now. Aren't you, little one? Yes, got his crest up. He's like looking around all happily. Do you want to see? I'll show you. It's better to see it with your own eyes, isn't it? There we go. Show the people of Earth what happy birdies you are. Oh, we're going to have a scratch. Oh, happy boys. There we go. To live, the cavalry had to turn and fight, leaving Brayaca and the central mass behind them. Valerius started in again and killed and danced back, saving his horse's strength for when it was needed. Even so, they made Corvus's wings spread out and forced men to fight one-on-one when they were better in solid ranks. It was not perfect, but it was better than he had hoped for, and after the disaster of the ditch, far more than he deserved. Sigva fought beside him, a shining beacon in the noon sun. She struck and swung and pulled her colt back and shouted, "We can do it, Valerius! Your name will be sung at every winter fire for generations. What a father this child will have!" They were killing and not dying. In the centre, Brayaka held her warriors together, and they too killed more than they lost. On the understanding of that a battle hinges, Valerius saw desperation grow in the expressions of those he faced, and for the first time began to believe the war host might win. He was thinking that when the trumpets blew again, differently. In the valley where the governor held his reserves, 2,000 rested men moved into formation and marched forward, ready to fight. The last two cohorts of the 14th Legion came over the ridge in a slower wave than those who had come before. They descended the slope steadily in fast, tight order, with their shields together and their blades poking between. On reaching level ground again, the men at the sides turned their shields outwards, making a grid of wood and iron that only a long, fast cavalry charge might fracture. There was no way to withdraw before them. Discipline among the warriors had long since been lost, and any chance of retreat in order. As far as Brayaka could see, was a boiling mess of battle, and all behind her. If they come at you in tight ranks and you can't go back, break out to the side. Don't give them a front to come in at. Valerius had said that twice in the evening and again in the morning. Knowing what might come, he had used his warriors to give her room, luring the cavalry out to the side. She thanked him for that, alive or dead, and saw the way she could go. "Out!" She shouted it over the tumult. "Out to the sides, make them spread out to reach us." Her voice was lost in the clash of living and dying. Gunavar heard her, and the 24 of her closest honour guard. They passed the message on. It moved sluggishly through the fighting mass, slowing to a standstill in pockets where to live mattered more than to pass a message of things that happened too far away to be seen. 5 spear lengths to the legionaries. Few of these bore javelins. Most carried the short, stabbing gladii, knifing out between the shields. Brayaka looked around her and saw no enemy close. Taking a risk, she drew the colt high into a rear and raised her sword arm high. "The sides, go out to the sides." They heard her then, the hundreds who were close. or they saw the flash of sunned metal and knew her and the colt who had become a second Hale, and fought for her with the heart of 100 warriors. The war host opened slowly like a stick untidily cleft, ready to absorb the oncoming men. The enemy heard her too, or knew her by her hair and the talk and the cloak. It had mattered to be seen and known. Somewhere nearby, she heard her name shouted in Latin. A trumpet sounded a rippling clarion that held her name somewhere within it, and was the cry of the huntsman to his hounds. On finding a greater and better quarry, the whole mass of the legion swayed her way. Move! That was Hawk at her side. His colt was married to hers, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. Get out! If they catch us here against the mass of the battle, they'll crush us as a hammer crushes tin. Guinevere came to her other side. The honour guard closed on her a shield of living flesh. Together they cut across the grain of battle, fighting towards clear land at the edge. They were within sight of clear land when the javelin hit. Iron punched her left arm high up above the ridge of her shield. She grabbed at the colt's mane and held her breath against the flooding blackness and a long, cold wait before the pain. Jubilation followed her from the legion's ranks behind. In the blurring confusion was a memory of Valerius by the fireside, dry in his humour, in the time before he gave her the spear. If you're hit, nothing will stop them. Even so, I think it would be better if you were not. She felt the touch of his mind and of Hermed's, and there was cool and a sense of running water, and it mattered only to stay mounted and to fight a way out across turf churned to blood and thick with the dead and debris of both sides, corpses and armour and weapons that made every footfall treacherous. Somewhere a crow called, and the deep bass tones hummed through her chest. She threw her shield away and felt better and pushed the white-legged colt towards clear land. Grania had sat with the warriors as they planned a strategy that made her mother a visible target, and had hated it, and still had not found a good reason to argue. Death came in war. If Briga sought a life, no amount of care would save it. If Briga chose to spare a life, no amount of risk would end it. It was Briga, then, who had put a solid line of horse warriors in the way when the Roman governor in the white-plumed helmet recognized her mother and directed the javelins of his men against her. His order had seen the fury of the battle redoubled, when it was already as hard and as hot and as murderous as anything Grania had ever seen. Blades flashed brilliant in the sun, and the screaming wounded drowned the war howls of tiring warriors. For 2 long moments, it was impossible to know who lived and who died. Grania looked away to the farther side of the field, where Adokos held a small knot of the bear warriors and guided them as a warrior guides a thrusting spear. Beyond him, Kunomar was recognisable even across the field of battle by his white-limed hair that stood proud from his head and the king band he wore on his arm. He and his bear warriors were engaged with the flank of the enemy and had withstood one cavalry charge, melting away to let them through and running in after to cut the horses' hamstrings from behind. They had learned that from the Batavians in the battle for the invasion and put it to good use now against them. Poor horses. It's dreadful, isn't it? The front had become skewed and they were fighting with their backs to the ridge. Grania watched her brother sprint up to the top of it to gain momentum in the rundown so that he could better leap for the back of a passing horse and haul the rider to the ground. He had endless energy. His third run was as fast as the 2 before it, only that he stopped on the ridge and looked across to where the Boadicea was admired in the spreading mass of the 14th Legion. Or perhaps had broken free. Ermed said, "Hawks alive." And so Grania had turned back to look and saw the moment when the white-legged colt broke free of the battle's edge out into the clear ground beyond. Theophilus, physician of Athens and Kos, said, "That wound won't kill her." And it mattered a great deal to believe him. Those who fought with the Boadicea were not of the same opinion. Gunnevar was there, and Hawk, and they were clearly trying to persuade her to put aside the late sky cloak and put on a helmet and make herself less of a target. There was a moment when it seemed she might have agreed, but it was already too late for that. A hammerhead of legionaries had broken free of the melee and was coming for them in disciplined formation, and Valerius and his honour guard were fighting Corvus's cavalry just behind, so that even if they had managed to render her ordinary, there was nowhere left for them to run. They made a stand, therefore, because there was nothing left to do. Grania watched Hawk lean down to wrench a shield from a dead warrior and pass it up to Brayaka with something that looked like a salute. And then Gunnevar found a spear, and they set their horses in a line, with the honour guard finding order at the sides, just in time to meet the first of the oncoming men. It was not possible then to look away. Finally, Corvus was close enough to be seen. His presence burned through the necessary concentration of battle until the flashing blades and sweating, crashing masses of horseflesh became thinly grey. Valerius fought and lived by instinct, not thought, and that instinct drew him forwards to the man on the bay mare who battled in a halo of God-given protection close to the edge of the main fighting. A cavalryman came at Valerius and died, and it occurred to him that he too lived in that same halo, where men died because they did not have to waste time in thinking, only needed to let his body act. He was within almost reach of the black colt when something sighed in the midst of battle. By chance, the fighting mass ahead of him swayed open, and by chance he looked through. "Brayaka's down!" Someone screamed it. Later, he found it was himself. Corvus turned before anyone else. His standard bearer turned a little after, and a trumpeter after that, who sounded a single note as of the hunt that has found fresh quarry. The bay mare leaped high as a deer and came down nearer to Brayaka. The Iceni had the better horses. Valerius was sure of that. He set the crow horse racing and did not care to come with him, or who might try to get in the way. The new shield was too heavy, which was why Brayaka dropped it too low, which was, in turn, what let in the blade that smashed across her back, so that only the mail shirt she wore kept her living. I looked up, and high up, still flying, about 30 feet up in the air, is a dragonfly buzzing around above my head. It's quite lovely. The Iceni had the better horses. Valerius was sure of that. He set the crow horse racing, I've read that, haven't I? And did not care who came with him or who might try to get in the way. Yes, I did read that last paragraph. Here we go. Mama T's multi-dimensional again. Have to whistle me home, boys and girls of Earth. Here she is, back in the room. All right, here we go. But I was called by the dragonfly. It's important. Dragonfly is a good omen, actually. Very good omen. Right. The new shield was too heavy, which was why Brayaka dropped it too low, which was, in turn, what let in the blade that smashed across her back so that only the mail shirt she wore kept her living. Her white-legged colt was twisting away even as the blade was coming in, but the dead on the ground made the turn unsmooth so that the arc of it threw her off balance and the force of the blow sent her down. She rolled and did not hit any loose blades, which was a miracle. She rose, and Hawk had thrown himself from his own horse and was beside her, helping her up. And then Gunnevar too had dismounted and pushed in tight on the other side, and they were fighting on foot with the horses behind them and the honour guard desperately trying to keep the legionaries at bay. They failed and drew back to the flanks so that the Boadicea's 3 could fight unhampered and yet not fear attack from the sides. In an odd way, it felt better than riding above the battle, working strategy against the legions. Brayaka tasted her own sweat and the blood of dead men and savoured them, and raised the too heavy shield again to block a strike that came for her head, and knew that she could count on the fingers of her one good hand the number of times left she could do that. She wanted to tell Hawk and Gunnevar to leave her, and knew she had not the breath, and that if she had, it would be wasted. She blocked another blow, badly. The edge of the blade flashed by her face. Hawk struck at the man who had delivered it and did not hit him. They were all tiring now. I grieve because it's hard to fight against fresh men when they've been battling for hours. It's a fait accompli. This was a Roman strategy. It was actually quite clever when you think about it. Run them into the ground and then slaughter them like pigs. Beyond awful. Anyway. Brayaka said, "We should stand back to back." She had learned that on Mona a long time ago as the way for warriors to die who knew there was no future. Hawk nodded and licked his lips and waited until the smash of the net's shield pushed him round. Gunnevar stepped back and fitted in the space between. Brayaka slipped on spilled guts and came up again, and Hawk was still there, pressing his shoulders against hers, solid and sure and dependable. A real man. A real man, people of Earth. Never found one like that in my entire fucking life. It's beyond awful. Not that I want a man that has to stand back to back while we're being slaughtered, but you know what I mean. Someone you can fucking lean on in times of trouble. He'll be there for you. Fuck. Abject fucking ghastly horror when I think about it. So I mustn't think about it, people of Earth. Of all her children, she had never thought to die. in the presence of the newest. It left hope at least that the others might live. The thinning ranks of the honour guard gave way. 2 legionaries came at her once again. Briaka struck back with her own blade and was lucky. It glanced off one helmet into the cheek of the man beside, who reeled back, holding his face and screaming. Blood splashed in her eye, blinding her. She blinked hard, and when she could see next, both of the men in front of her were dead, and Valerius was where they had been, protecting her bodily with the crow horse slashing frantically on both sides. A dozen warriors of Mona followed him, spreading death in their wake. Very quickly, where had been mayhem was a circle of quiet. Briaka felt Hawk sag against her and tried to remain standing. To fall now would humiliate them both. Her brother threw out orders as a green stick fire throws sparks. Hugh and 3 other slingers took position in front of her and warriors behind. Longinus and Sigfar came up on either side to support the 3 standing warriors. Valerius turned in and she could read his face. Briaka, can you mount? The white-legged colt was too far away to reach. It was hard to think clearly. She said, "Your horse won't take us both." He stared at her blankly then. "I know, I didn't mean that. I just need to know if..." "Ban!" She screamed the wrong name. The gap when he did not know himself nearly killed him. Someone else knew it first and faster. A bay mare that she had reared from a foal slewed round in a perfect turn. A blade came for her brother's head, swung by a man who had once been a friend. She screamed that name too and did not expect him to answer. Corvus brought death, and this time would not be deflected. Corvus brought death, Valerius answered him. There was no respite in the fighting about them, no quarter given from either side to let them settle it alone. Only one more man to fight in the disintegrating chaos of the battle, and others coming in at either side. From the edge of his eye, Valerius saw Hugh fit a sling stone and shouted, "Don't!" and did not know why he had done so. Iron flashed in the too hot sun. Corvus's blade came murderously for his head. The crow horse spun out of the way and red and slashed, because Valerius had thought it, or the beast had thought it, and Valerius had followed its lead. In battle there was no distinction between these two, and never had been. Perfect symbiosis between man and his horse. Corvus's mount was almost as good. I'll segue a little bit when I talk about perfect symbiosis between a person and their horse. My horse, Asphiloth, was not properly broken. She was still partially wild. I had to lead her by the halter or the bridle reins, Lead her like a person has a dog on a leash. Lead her along for about, I think it was about 2 or 3 kilometres, I can't remember now. Long walk from the farm where she was adjusted. I would lead her down to the beach at Ohio Bay. And she loved to go to the beach because she loved to roll in the sand. She would immediately, when we got to the sand, even if I was riding her, I'd have to jump off fairly quickly because she would just drop down and roll, even with the saddle on. But anyway, I would lead her down because she didn't like being ridden with her nose pointed away from home. And it was very difficult to get her to move anywhere with me riding her, facing away from what she considered her home was the farm. So anyway, this particular day, I was leading her. She was behind me, and we were walking, and then I broke into a bit of a run. She was trotting behind me, and we were building up a bit of momentum. I was running quite fast, and she would match my pace, which was quite funny because one time my mother, who didn't know that Aspha matched your pace, my mother was holding her for me while I went up to go to the loo or something out the front of our house. And Mum was a bit scared of her, so Mum started walking faster. So Aspha started walking faster behind her, and Mum thought she was chasing her. So Mum broke into a bit of a trot, and the horse broke into a bit of a trot. And next thing I know, all I can hear is screaming, "She's trying to run me down! She's trying to kill me!" So I go running back out. I went, "No, Mum, she just matches your pace. She won't hurt you." So I already knew this, right? So this particular day, we're on the beach, Asphiloth and I. She'd already had her rolling in the sand and luxuriating. Oh, she really loved that. And so I'm leading her, and I break into a bit of a run because we were happy and carefree on the beach. It was my happiest moments was when I was with my horse, actually, in my childhood. Anyway, I stumbled on, I don't know, some divot in the sand or a bit of a hole. Maybe someone had been making a sandcastle. I don't know what I stumbled on. But she was running fairly close behind me, Aspha. And I stumbled and I immediately fell, and my head landed on the sand. And I just put my hand over my head because I expected that she wouldn't be able to stop in time. She was only like 3 feet, a metre or so behind me. And I thought, she's going to crush my skull with her hooves, which would have been very easy for her to do because she didn't expect me to fall out either. And anyway, I heard her snort, and I'm holding my arm over my head, and I closed my eyes, and I expected my skull to be crushed in that moment, actually. I waited for it. I was just like thinking, oh well, this is how it ends. My whole life kind of flashed. And then there was a skidding of sand that skidded into my face, and I was like, oh my God, here we go. And I just sort of quietly inhaled, just went. And I looked up, and Ass was right above me looking down as if to say, are you okay? And I look up, and there's this look between me and my pony, you know. And I looked at her and I went, Asfa, you stopped. And she looked at me almost as if to say, you gave me a hell of a fright, because she got a fright too. And I looked up and I just said, thank you for not crushing me. And then I gingerly got up. I hadn't injured anything, fortunately, just got a fright. And I patted her and I said to her, now I know you love me, because you could have easily crushed me in that moment, but you saved my life. And she just nuzzled me, you know. She was a beautiful animal. A beautiful animal. And the trust that was between us after that moment, you know, because she could be quite, she would do things like, she'd throw me off and drop her head down so that I'd go flying over her neck and fall. And she did that frequently, just to be, I think, a bit mischievous. But this day it was like she just had an instinct that I hadn't meant to throw myself down on the ground, and that she knew that I was right, would have gone right under her, you know, metal horseshoes and hooves. So, symbiosis and trust that develops between animals and humans, and the intense telepathy that she and I shared, so much that I knew when I needed to go up to the paddock because she was in danger with the wire caught around her fetlock, was amazing. Was amazing. It was a terrible wrench when I had to sell her because we were migrating to Brisbane when I was 23. It was a terrible, terrible wrench. And for about 10 years, even first 10 years we lived here, I would often have dreams of her and nightmares, and I would worry about whether she was safe and being cared for. And then one day the dreams stopped and I realised she'd probably died, you know, of old age, as horses do eventually, like everyone. In their 20s, I think. I have to suddenly can't stop coughing. But yes. Corvus's mount was almost as good. A bay mare marked with the brand of the Iceni on its shoulder. It skittered sideways, avoiding the dead on the ground, spinning to send its rider forward with its shield high, protecting them both, and his blade coming up in an underhand stab that reached for Valerius's heart. His face was clear above it, framed by a helmet that bore dents on either side, with the black hair fringed below, and the wide black eyes, and the runnels of sweat, and the lucid, focused concentration that had lasted through the day and would last on as long as was needed. They could have spoken, perhaps, between the sobbing breaths of battle, but there was nothing left to say. If I die first, I will wait for you. Neither had said, if you kill me, I will still wait. But it had been there, and was again thick in the air between them. Valerius counted the stab and turned his open shoulder in to give a target, and danced the crow horse back when the invitation was not taken, and the edge of a shield came instead for his face, and then his arm. He swung his own sword at an exposed flash of brown skin, and saw blood spring fresh to the surface. The surprise of that slowed his shield so that he in turn was wounded on the thigh, and a long scrape up the neck of the crow horse, who screamed its own anger and high-stepped over a wounded Siluran and rose and lashed out and came down again too soon, stumbling. For all its heart and hate, the crow horse, too, was tiring. Valerius had never thought to sit on this horse and find it tired. Shock clove his heart as Corvus had not done. The doors to his mind fell open then, and the hallways were empty of everything, of gods and love and past and present, of a child unborn and a sister newly healed, of strategy and tactic and basic battlefield survival. Everything but the impossibility of losing this horse and finding a life worth living beyond. It is a bit like that. Some of the greatest loves of my life have not been human, and the love has remained long after their deaths or their unwilling parting. Despair. I'm going to have to get a glass of water, people of Earth. Just one moment. Please excuse me, I actually am an asthmatic, although I haven't relied on Ventolin and Serotype quite a long time. I've been doing very well, but probably the wind is whipping up dust or pollen or something, because I'm all of a sudden got set off. Right. Can't remember where we were up to now, by all the gods, honestly. Despair dragged at him, heavy as death. Through a rising red mist, it came to him that he was tired, and beyond tired, and because he had seen it in others, he knew that this killed more men than stupidity or arrogance or bad luck together. He and his horse slewed round, avoiding another strike by too small a margin. If I die first, we could die together, which would be fitting and good. A glimmer of that, and how it might be made to happen, probed through the fog. Searching for open ground, he dragged the crow horse back. A Corvus followed as if joined by birth cords, and neither could break. The rest of the battle had faded to nothing. After Hugh, no one among the war host had attempted to intervene except to keep killing the legionaries and the cavalry and make space for Valerius to do what he must. To his left, Briaca had not yet found a horse. He wanted to shout to Sigvar and had not the time nor the breath. Valerius fainted and each time let his shield drop because he was tired. And Corvus, who knew him best, saw it and came in harder. Valerius struck and was countered, and the backstroke cut him again on the neck this time, where the armour ended. He jerked his head back and swore and let the crow horse dart sideways as well as it could and waited for the next cut, which should come high above his shoulder, and did, so that he, Valerius, move! That was Longinus, in time, with the right name, and still too late. The crow horse was already turning. He owed his life to that. The blade sang with his soul's name and shaved hide and metal from his back. He had nothing ready to counter the stroke, and the horse, which might have done so, was spent. He used his knees to turn it, and it answered more slowly, and the backswing this time was aimed not for him, but for the horse, a broad, arcing sweep that took its neck as the god took the bull at slaughter, opening vessels and windpipe down to the bone, so that it fell as if poleaxed, and only the fat that they had been turning threw him clear. No! He screamed for the horse, which could make no sound. The crow horse lay thrashing in a mindless gallop. Its lifeblood flooded the earth, whipped to foam by its ending breath. Life was still in its eyes. Valerius threw himself bodily for its head and lay along it, weeping. They gave him space for that, the men and women, who lived and died around him, because to grieve for a horse mattered more than the battle. Or perhaps they left him for Corvus, who had brought his own horse to a standstill and watched, white-faced, above. There were no words. Corvus said them anyway. I'm sorry. I will wait for you It will wait for you as I would have done. It's better like this. Your war host is losing. The reserves of the 14th have broken them. When the 20th are sent, it will be over. They had trained together so often in how a mounted man might make a sure kill of the enemy on the ground. Valerius made himself stand because he would not die lying down. The gods made his world slower that he might seem to live longer. In a timeless infinity, he saw the beginnings of the sweep that would finish him and mapped its progress back and round and down towards his head. Ow. Which was not there because once, in a long winter on the banks of the Rhine, they had put some effort into finding a counter to this move, and just once, in 1,000 times of trying, it had worked. The gods had slowed the world that Valerius might seem to live longer, and he moved fast within it. In a move like the warrior's mount, but harder, he threw himself at Corvus's horse, ducking the arc of the incoming blade, and fighting for purchase on a beast that bucked at the new weight, and reaching for a handhold on an armoured man who half knew he was coming, but still could not quite shake him off. For 2 strides he struggled, then instinct and the need to win won over fear and exhaustion, and he was riding behind Corvus as he had once done on the banks of the Rhine, except that now he had a blade in his hand and a reason to use it. Not a good enough reason. Assailed by a smell he had known all of his adult life that was least when a man came from the baths, and most when he was in battle or had spent the night in another's company, Valerius could not make the final strike. They had tried one more thing in that long, tedious winter, with the snow hock deep on the ground and ice over the river thick enough to ride a horse across, and to practice cavalry manoeuvres. Valerius reached up with one arm under Corvus's armpit and thrust with his knee and twisted with all that was left of his strength and his grief. I'm sorry, he said, as the other man fell. I will still wait for you, however long it is, and know that you wait for me. The mare was Iceni. She knew the words that he spoke to her, and answered the nudge of his knee. She turned when he asked, so that he was in time to see a man in a foul wolfskin cape throw himself from his horse and crouch beside the body that lay crooked on the ground. Corvus might have been breathing. There was room still to believe that. The mare turned away again and came up when Valerius asked her to, and reared high over the battle so that he saw the whole lie of it and the emerging pattern, and then found Braiaca, who was with Hawk in the heart of a boiling knot of fighting, and losing as her war host was losing. He had been wrong. He did, after all, have a reason to live. Valerius set the new horse forward and raised his blade, asking the gods for help to reach his sister. We'll continue on with chapter 45. We're very close to completion, people of Earth. Only a few more chapters to go. Chapter 45. Guinevere sold her life hard, taking with her the man who had killed her and the one who stood at his side. She fell forwards, and her body, for a while, blocked the incoming men. Braiaca had no time to grieve, only spoke the 3 words that took the dead dreamer safe to Briga, and those with little enough breath to spare. Beyond the ones who had killed Guinevere, more came. The string of legionaries had become a flood, and the horse warriors of Mona were barely holding them. They were 2, she and Hawk, standing in a crescent of horses and cavalry with armoured men coming in from the front. Braiaca had found a lighter shield, and someone had passed her water, and she had found that she could breathe again without her throat's feeling as if it were on fire, and she could at least hold her shield arm steady, if not lift it well. And even if death were certain, there was a joy in meeting it openly, in full awareness, in the company of those she loved. She fought as well as she had ever done. Life and care were narrowed to the cut of a blade and the block of a strike and the spray of sweat and blood, and the greater picture mattered not at all, nor did she want it to. There came a moment's respite when one man fell dead, and others had not yet stepped over the growing clutter of bodies. Hawk was still with her, a sentient shadow. Braiaca said, "Ready?" and he had the strength to grin. She picked a man and stepped forward into a sudden gap and struck at him and he fell at the first touch, which was entirely surprising. And then Valerius was there, brilliant and savage and furious. He was no longer riding the crow horse, but mounted instead on a bay mare that had been her gift once to Grania, and Grania's to Corvus, and she had not seen him take it. She spoke Briga's invocation for Corvus because he too must be dead, even if she could not see him. Valerius was as welded to the mare as he had been to the crow. Together mare and man reaped their own harvest among the legion. Men fell back, replaced by others who saw glory in the killing of those in front of them and cared nothing if their lives were the cost. It's insanity, isn't it? Truly insanity. Bloodlust. Absolute insanity. Hello, little boy. Are you insane? No, Mama T. I'm of perfect sound mind. What about you, Kermie? He says, I'm solid as a rock, Mama. I'm the most solid birdie you've ever been owned by. Good. I like my men to be solid. You kind of have to laugh, don't you? They are very sweet, the two of them, though. Even so, his passing created a space where it was possible to think and to realise that it mattered to be mounted, and so to look about for her own white-legged colt and find that she could no longer see it, nor were any of the growing number of the loose horses within reach. Up, Valerius was there, just in front of her, stinking of horse sweat and breathing hard. He pushed the mare across broadside towards her and reached down to take her arm. Up behind me, now, Sigfa will take Hawk. He was her brother. He was an officer in the Roman cavalry whose orders were not given lightly and had only rarely been ignored. For both these reasons, she did as he asked, and grasped his arm at the elbow and made a passable leap to the rump of his horse. Behind, in the ranks of the legion's reserves, 6 legionary trumpets pealed a short, repeating sequence. Not now, damn you! Valerius spun his new horse on its hocks. Braica grabbed for his waist with her one good arm and held on. He set the mare to climb the ridge, and they rose for a moment above the field on the parting it created. Spread below, on the eastern side, was the carnage where the untrained mass of the war host battled the precision of the 14th Legion and were manifestly losing. Unable or unwilling to move to the margins, they were crushed tighter in on themselves, unable to find the space to swing their blades or use their horses or draw back an arm to wield a sling. West of the ridge was peace and order. Ranks of unsullied blades waited there, held by men who had stood quiet and watched their brethren die, saving themselves until the time when their coming could turn the battle. That time was now. The trumpets promised and demanded equally. As Breyaka watched, rank upon rank of legionaries detached smoothly from the lines and locked their shields and drew their blades and began the short march to the ridge. They were silver white in the afternoon sun, a long rippling line of iron and bronze and unwavering intent. The trumpet calls clove them in the centre, separating them out into two moving wings to make a horned moon of their own with all the devastation of their weight behind it. Valerius had already set the bay mare down the ridge. To stay on was a challenge. Success and survival, one more gift from the gods. Breyaka shouted over his shoulder, "We have to get the warriors out of the way. They need room to regroup." Her brother shouted something back, but it was lost in the sudden clash of iron as Sigvar and Hawk came up alongside, and then Longinus and Maeve and Hugh and the others of Mona, who bunched around her and broke through the thinning ranks of Corvus's cavalry and were riding as she had asked, out to the farthest reach of the wagon line, where Grania waited with Ermed and Bellos and the Greek physician, who must, by now, be thinking he had picked the wrong side to support. Planes are very loud today and they're flying quite low. It's a bit odd people are there. Probably because of the wind though. A white-legged black colt with the brand of the Batavians on its shoulder came to a halt in the open land near the wagons. Finding no battle around, it dropped its head to graze. Grania waited for someone to notice, and when they did not, she stepped down from the wagon and walked to it, cheering quietly as she had heard Valerius do. Pardon me. The stone was with her, and all the Batavian horses had grown with hounds from when they were had grown with hounds from when they were foals, people of it. The old hound flopped onto the floor and lay on its side, savouring the sun. The black colt-eyed girl and hound equally, and chose not to run. Her palm was heavy with salt sweat. The Grania let the beast lick, and then offered the crook of her elbow, which was as wet. It tasted her, and she took hold of its bridle and then grew bold and tried to lead it. It paused a moment to show that a choice had been made, and then followed to the place behind the wagons where the water was kept. She splashed some into the bowl of an upturned shield, and it drank and grazed again, and she held on to the looped ends of the reins and prayed to the ancestor and the elder grandmother that Breyaka should look across and see that her daughter had found her horse. Quite soon after, Ermed walked past and caught a bright red colt bearing the brand of the Iceni and hawks, mark of the fire lizard, and so it was certain that the gods had sent these two to be with them, and not simply that they had smelled the water or knew the people on the wagon and had come by half chance to known faces and voices they trusted. What's my hair doing? Weird things. Never mind. Ow. Kunamar saw the first movement of the legions as he ran up the ridge. He stopped and raised a hand and hollered a name. Ardokos joined him in moments. His father in spirit had never been far away. Kunamar said, "We could attack them before they reach the ridge and throw our lives for nothing?" Ardokos was looking north, which would be in this direction, along the ridge's line, to where the horse warriors of Mona fought, to where Breyaka had been unhorsed and was now, astonishingly, riding doubled with Valerius. As they watched, the pair crested the ridge and down again. There was no need to speak further. Amongst the bear, some things were certain. And the first of those was that the need to protect the lives of the Boadicea and those who attended her was set before the immediate needs of battle. Kunamar nodded at a question that had not been asked. Ardokos put his 2 fingers to his lips and whistled a soaring note that fell away at the end. The pierce of it was sharp as any trumpet. A winter's training was paid in that one moment. 40 of the she-bear broke away from their killing and came to join him on the ridge. The remaining dozens fought on as if there were no change. Kunamar led them. Ulla was a lithe shadow at his side. Ardokos and his older warriors held the rear against possible attack. Light and unarmoured, in full view of the advancing legionaries, they ran down onto the Roman side of the ridge and along the free ground where the fallen dead were fewer, to the far edge of the combat. There they rose up again behind the Boadicea and those who attacked her. At the crest of the ridge, the Kunomar wiped his palm on his tunic and re-gripped his knife and raised his hoarse voice in the bare howl, that the men of Rome might know on whose blade they died before Briga came to take them. A shining tide of legionaries crested the ridge and flowed down towards the battle. Trumpets moved them, spreading them out as they came, so that half went to one side and half to the other of the massed ranks already fighting. The two parts joined together neatly as the hilt fits the pommel of the sword, leaving no gaps. The killing began at once and was neatly efficient. The legion's reserves were fit and rested and had drunk water before they marched and had trained for half their lives in the slaughter of untrained men and women. Agronia stood holding the white-legged colt and watched half-trained youths fall like corn at harvest, and felt sick. Stone began to whine so that she had to take hold of him with her other hand to keep him from running into the fray. They're coming. Ermid said it, the first time she had spoken since Breaca fell from her horse. He's bringing her to the horses. Grania dragged her gaze from the slaughter and looked instead towards the boiling mass of horse warriors and cavalry, from which burst, galloping, two doubly laden horses and a surrounding guard of Mona. Urgently and with emphasis, Belos said, "Ermed, she's alive," as if there had been doubt and might be so still. And then Theophilus said, "Kunomar's coming over the ridge, and Ardokos." And it was true. The Boadicea's son and the Boadicea's brother arrived together, so that the two parties almost clashed and swayed back, eyeing each other as if they might be enemy. Valerius said, "It's over. We need to get out and back. We have to sound the retreat." It came almost as a question, as if he was still unsure of his right to give commands. Kunomar said, "The she-bear follow where you lead." And then, Breaca, the battle plan was yours, and the retreat. Do what you must. Valerius nodded his thanks. Orders flowed from him without cease. "Hawk, Breaca, mount your horses. Kunomar Ardokos, call in as many of the she-bear as you can reach. Maeve, Zigfa, gather the horse warriors. We'll need to make a rear guard to cover those leaving the field. Hugh, sound the horn for the retreat." Grania passed close to Hugh as she brought her mother's colt to be mounted. For that reason alone, she saw the anguish on his scarred face and understood what was happening. Hugh had borne the horn of Mona for less than a day. For 1,000 years it had sounded attack. This once, at Valerius's insistence, they had saved it for the one sound every fighting man and woman would recognise and was oath-sworn to obey. The signal to abandon the fight and run in whatever order they could, to separate and keep on separating, making space and clear ground between them until the ranks of legionaries had thinned so that the power of their togetherness was lost. Hugh brought the horn up and hesitated. Never had it been used thus. "Do it!" Valerius snarled at him, savage as any hound. "We've lost. If Paulinus calls Hengez's Batavian cavalry in at the wings, we'll never live to fight again." Hugh wet his lips raggedly and blew. The sound of the horn was the song of the hare, made loud as a bull's bellow. Thrice and thrice again it rang silver strong over the field. Legionaries and warriors hesitated in their bloodshed. The one side, because it was a sound they did not know. The other, because they knew it intimately and had not expected to hear it ever, and so were not prepared. They were not trained either in the art of disengagement. Grania watched men and women die who did not know how to walk backwards in battle and live. Those of Kunomal's she-bears who had been left made a living wall for those they could reach at the far side of the field. Elsewhere, others less skilled made a wall of corpses that had much the same effect. Unsmoothly, with overwhelming sorrow and astonishing numbers of dead, the warriors of the Boadicea's war host obeyed the command of the horn and abandoned their fight. The white-legged colt danced on the spot, ready again for battle. Just for a moment, Grania saw Valerius's soul stand awake in his eyes, purely Iceni, alive with the love of a horse. Then a veil dropped, and he was half Roman again, throwing out brisk orders as if all those around were his cavalrymen and he the officer. "Mount, everyone mount, now." They were settling in the saddles when the men of Corvus's cavalry wing broke through the lines of Mona to reach them. Big men, fit and angry, led by a black-haired savage with a stinking wolfskin across his shoulders, who screamed his hatred as shrilly as any she-bear. That one came for Valerius and struck at him and would have killed him if Longinus had not been there to block his blade. Gronius saw nothing after that but fighting, and no sense to be made of any of it. "Get Grania out," a man's voice, Valerius. Kunamar stuck his knife in a passing horse and saw it fall, and then turned at Valerius's command and went back for his sister. Hawk was already there, his brother, oath sworn to family. He stood by a flashy grey filly with a brand on its shoulder that said it had won 3 races. His hands were looped in a hammock for her to mount. "Grania, up!" He was like Valerius giving urgent orders, not understanding her fear of fast horses. Kunamar said, "Grania, you must take this one. The pony isn't fast enough. Please, we'll help you." She looked at him, her face a picture of horror. Then she opened her mouth and screamed, not at him, but at his brother. "Hawk!" The blade missed both of them, but only because of Grania. Hawk rolled and came up without his shield, but wielding the blade of the she-bear, Iburovik's blade, 2-handed as it was made to be used. The savage with the rancid wolfskin across his shoulders turned his black colt on its hocks and came back again, howling as loud as the she-bear. Hawk shouted, "See to Grania," and stepped in to meet him. For Kunamar to set Grania on the horse was the matter of moments. The grey race filly was battle-trained and stood solid as stone with mayhem around her. "Go!" Grania whispered it from the depths of terror. "He needs you." Wolfskin was good. At another time Kunamar might have admired him. He used his horse as a weapon in the ways of the best Iceni. The she-bear were trained to overcome that, but not Hawk, who had only been brought to the edges of what the bear could give. Even so, Hawk too was astonishing in his skill. He stood full on to the oncoming horse, wielding the great, broad war blade as if born to it. His hair was woven in a warrior's knot, and crow feathers fluttered damp with his sweat at his left temple. He was Iceni to the roots of his hair and his soul, and he fought with a grace that would have left singers weeping as they told of it round the winter fires. Were there any left to see it? There were none, only Kunamar watching as his brother in soul faced down the black colt and made it swerve, slicing for its head and bringing the blade round and up to graze the back of the rider even as he spun and came round for a second pass. Each move was fluid in its economy, and Connemara could believe that he was the only one who saw that Hawk was fighting on the last of his reserves, and that each controlled swing of the blade took him closer to an ending beyond which death waited, draped in a stinking wolf skin, with no care for the beauty it destroyed. The end came faster than he had thought. The black colt could turn on one hock and not break stride. Its rider spun it in a curve round Hawk, and this time had the measure of the two-handed, two-looped swing. He ducked the first arc and brought his own blade back-handed across the line of its flight, flicking upwards so that his blade caught in a notch that an ancestor of Connemara's had created in single-handed combat against a white-haired warrior of the Koratani in a dispute over a boundary line. Connemara had never heard who won that fight so many generations ago. Now the fault in the blade cost Hawk his life, or seemed to. The great blade leapt from his hand like a salmon at spawning, and sailed high, spiraling to come to rest 3 strides from where he stood. 3 strides, and it might as well have been 3 days' ride. Hawk stood unarmed before the wolf-caped rider and smiled at him as a true warrior smiles, facing death. He drew his knife, which was a brave thing, and pointless. Even a she-bear would have had trouble against such as this. He threw a smile at Connemara, said, "Take care of Grania for me," and stepped in to face his end. 3 strides. The blade was within Connemara's reach. He had almost taken it up for the ease of it and the chance to give it back to Hawk, that he might at least die with his brother beside him and the ancestor blade in his hand. The shade of Ibrovik stopped him, solid as the earth, as the sky, as the sweating, blowing colt and the black-bearded man who rode it. His grandfather stood before him, so close that Connemara could see every wrinkle and line in his skin, could see the brown eyes and their care for him, could feel the eternal cold that wrapped him, could hear again the words that had been cut into Connemara's soul since before he returned to his homeland. If my grandchild ever wields my blade, know that the death of the Iceni will follow And then, newly, is one man's life, even your brother's, worth so much loss? The she-bear is your God and my dream. In her name, I ask you not to do this. There was nothing he could do. His oath was to the bear, his soul given into her care in the caves of the Caledonii, which is modern-day Scotland, people have heard. The binding was complete and for life, and there was nothing and no one who could override it. He was caught in the living reality of his nightmare, but that it was Hawk who was under attack, and by a wolf man, not a bear. He could still fight, though. He had his knife and his courage, and his brother had need of him. Kunama turned, ready to help, and found that he was already too late, and the nightmare was made complete. Hawk. No one heard her shout this time. The noise of battle was too great. Grania watched her brother's blade fly high from his hand and gouge a line in the earth less than a spear's length from the back of her horse. Dubornos had been sworn to her, and she had let him die because he wanted it. Hawk was sworn to her before all the others, and so she to him, and he manifestly did not want to die. He had said so to the dear elders on the night of the horned moon. The grey race filly stood still as stone. Grania slid to the ground and was running even as Kunamar was running. He might have reached the blade before her, but he faltered and she did not. The thread that drew her to the weapon was the sole thread that had bound her to the hair, only brighter, because now they were in battle. She lifted it and heard the song at last. The hilt swamped her hands. The blade had its own balance in the way the practice blades on Mona had never done. The feeding bear on the pommel offered its own weight and its own momentum. It dipped down so that the long sweep of blued iron was the blade rose without effort, and all she had to do was let her hands be the balance point between the two. The ease of it was uncanny, so that she stared at the blade and the old marks made by the ancestors, and the new ones hacked by Hawk in his endeavours, and Grania! Someone screamed her name from beyond the end of the blade. She looked up, remembering the battle. Wolfskin came at her, grinning, and another man at his side. She heard the wolf-caped one shout, "Flavius, this one's mine, her life for Corvus." and the earth rolled with the hammer of their horses, and their blades sang for her life. And somewhere the elder grandmother said, "Now is the time of choosing which matters most, your line or your land." Which made no sense, even as she saw Connemara leap for the man, Flavius, with his blade bared and Hawk at his side, and together they might reach him, but that still left Wolfskin, who had proved himself in battle and now came directly for her, grinning, with his blade swept back. She tasted death and tried not to be afraid, and failed. But then her mother was there, throwing the white-legged colt forward in all her terrible fury, and Stone was at her side, where he had wanted to be, all through the battle. The grandmother smiled and said, "Good," and the world was made right. She felt her father close. He had been there from the moment she had slithered from the back of Valerius's horse, a silent presence, watching. He was not alone. The grandmother was there, and the ancestor dreamer, and the son hound, and his lineage. They stood all around, these ancestors of her line, in the place where their children's children lived or died. She listened for the deep bell note of Briga's crow, and did not hear it any louder than it told for all the other dead. Hawk fought brilliantly. Even as she saw him lose the blade, she knew that she had seen something exceptional, and that others had seen it, enough to be sure the memory of it lived on after his death. She began the keening to Briga as the blade fell from his hands, and then stopped because Connemara had stepped close, and she heard her own father as clearly as she had first heard him saying, "If my grandchild ever wields my blade, know that the death of the Iceni will follow. I trust you to see it does not happen." But Connemara heard him too. She saw him stop and put his hand to his face and turn away from the blade and draw his knife instead. A relief left her weak and not looking beyond, so that it was too late when she shouted, "Grania, no! I trust you to see it does not happen." Far, far too late. The world hung on a blade's edge and was falling to destruction. Grania, slim, slight, fragile, and as recognizable as her mother, had walked onto the field of battle with a blade in her hand and was about to die for it. Distantly she heard Venutius set his question again. If it comes to the choosing, which matters more, your line or your land? She had no idea if it had come to the choosing, only that Grania must not die. There was a poor spear's throw between the oncoming cavalryman and the children who carried all hope for a future and the light of her smile. I sacrificed my horse for my lineage that never bore fruits of the next generation, people of Earth. For children that abandoned me as my horse would not willingly have abandoned me. I know it's a bit of poetic license, but it happens to be true, people of Earth. That I prioritise my children in the hope of enduring love and continuity, you understand. At least the enduring love of my children. It's a bit bizarre when you think about it. Mama T must try not to think about it, or I might really, really, truly, once and for all, go completely insane. But I'm past that now. Clawed my mind back from years of torture and psych meds and failure to be loved and cared for and treated with basic respect or kindness or honour by human men and their handmaidens, and even my own progeny. Gone, gone, gone. The mind altering of the COVID vaccines, I blame it on that, people of Earth. Rightly or wrongly, every fibre of my being knows that when the final death knell was given to any scrap of my daughter's love, and if she's honest and decent, she will remember I begged her not to participate in that. It's like a switch that they turn off in their brains, almost like it's reactive to some kind of a radio signal. It's astonishing. It's astonishing. I must not think about it. I must not. The two men came at once. each seeking the glory of having slain the Boadicea's daughter. Her 2 sons dealt with the incomer Flavius and killed him. The gods gave her the other, the wolf-caped savage, as their gift. She set the white-legged colt into a leap that halved the distance and brought him up alongside. Stone came from the other side, running almost as sound as he had done through his youth. Her heart leapt to see him. The wolf man did not swerve. He saw the woman, the horse, and the hound, and deemed them no threat. His blade was within reach of Grania. He was right. She was too far away to stop him, except there was a move that her father had taught her lifetimes ago, when the names of the heroes were still sung by the fire, and the ways they had died in the certain saving of others. She had never practiced it, even in play fights. The risk had always seemed too great. She set the parts one by the other in her mind now, and they were perfect. She had less than a horse's length to make herself ready, to leap for the neck of the oncoming horse, cutting up for its throat, even while her weight pulled down and round as a bear does in the kill, so that it stumbled and fell. And she heard the crack of its neck and the scintillating havoc of an armoured body slamming into the ground at a speed that must surely be fatal, before she let herself know that a sword blade had already hit her quite hard somewhere under her bad arm. That was always the risk. The heroes had all died making this move. It was why they were heroes. She heard Grania and Valerius and her father all say her name. Somewhere nearby, Stone howled and hailed with him. The world closed into black. And thus concludes chapter 45. I'm tempted to carry on till the end, but we'll save it for tomorrow, people of Earth. Tomorrow we will read chapter 46. It's getting so windy, birdie boys. Mama might need to bring you back in the house. It's a little bit too blustery for you little birdies to be stuck in a cage in wild winds. And I'm hungry. I need to eat some lunch or make some lunch, or I need to feed people of Earth. Feed. Like a wild woman at heart, I truly am. My stomach's been rumbling and it's a bit grotesque, listening to the innards of your guts demanding tribute as it does, but only human after all. So I bid you good afternoon, Have a beautiful day, night, afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are on planet Earth and the space-time continuum. Live free, live wild, live joyously. Love the ones who love you truly and honouringly and deeply and enduringly. I have to roll my eyes at that one, don't I? Dear goddess. Well, we had a good run of it for a very long time. Some of my most cherished beloved ones. Till the nanotechnology changed their minds about me and my refusal to be silent and to be compliant with it all. Changed their minds about me, and I regret nothing, not one thing. My only regret is they didn't listen to me, and I didn't force any decisions upon them. They made them all quite willingly of their own free will. But I did ask them, don't comply, don't comply. So now I'm doomed to struggle alone for however long it takes me to find my tribe of others who were courageous and honourable like me. If ever. There can't be that many of us out there. And of those, how many of us have died from the shedding symptoms? I can't possibly know. But we'll hold our eye, those of us who remembered their gods and their ancestor dreamers. Foolish though we were deemed at the time. The proof, my friends, is always in the pudding. Holding your line against all the odds. Knowing that ultimately we all eventually die of something or other. So never, ever, ever give in to the fear-mongering of the governments and the corporatocracies and Big Pharma and the filthy, treacherous celebrity shillers, the pissweak, and those who think it's funny to follow a fashion trend. When medicine becomes a fashion trend, run in the opposite direction, people of Earth. The same can be said for Botox, Ozempic, and other fashions they inflict upon the foolish and the unwise. Well, Mama T has spoken. And I had a better night last night. Much better night. I only got up once at 3:24 a.m. Had a very good long pee, where I produce all that urine from, I have no idea. It's astonishing sometimes. But only once as a gift, because I've been up a fair bit in the past few weeks. And my sleep results was 0.8, so just under 1 times per hour. So that too is a gift. It's why I feel more clear-headed today, more powerful, more courageous, more grounded and centered. The gift of a good night's rest, am I right, people of Earth? So those of you who are dreamers like me, dream sweet, dream safe, dream beautifully. And when your dreams are potent warnings of unwelcome changes or inclement weather or unpleasant shifts in human consciousness are not to our continuing favour or survival. Pay attention, act accordingly. Write down your dreams, people of Earth, as a practice. If nothing else, it reminds you of who you are and whom you might yet become, and the history and the future blending into one gnosis. Goddess bless from the Tanya at Sacred Space, Titania's realm.